Welcome to Grab or Stab. I'm Matt McFarland. Here we grab if it's good and we stab if it's not. Let's talk about the 90s for a second. Puka shell necklaces, Janko jeans, frosted tips, the Macarena. The 90s got pretty weird. It was definitely a weird time. And the movie we're gonna talk about today definitely fits in that narrative. This movie's all over the place, and you're gonna see what I'm talking about. Shit's about to get weird. Now, what movie am I talking about? Well, today we're gonna be diving into Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, released in 1990. But before we get into all of that, let me explain how decisions are made around this place on whether or not to grab or stab a movie. First of all, how good are the kills? Second, the characters. Third, how does the movie affect either the genre or the franchise at the time? And lastly, how scary is the movie?
So the second TCM movie was a wild ride, and the franchise was now in a weird place. With the third movie of the franchise, the intention was to bring the series back to its gritty roots. After the success of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, New Line Cinema bought the rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise from the Cannon Group, with the intention of making Leatherface the primary star over his cannibalistic family. But this entire thing was just a mess. They planned to film it in Texas, but eventually filmed it in California next to a theme park, and couldn't find a director. New Line first wanted director Peter Jackson. You might know who he is. You know, three-time Oscar winner who directed The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit trilogy. It's crazy to imagine that if Peter Jackson had directed this one, he might have never gone on to have all the success he later had because of how bad this probably would have gone. Not to say he wouldn't have done a good job, but I don't think New Line would have let him make the necessary changes to make it as good as it could have been. And you'll see what I'm talking about. They even offered the directing job to Tom Savini, and after the job was turned down by just about everyone in the industry, New Line eventually hired Jeff Burr by default, who was later fired a week into production for going over budget and over schedule. Then with no one else to replace him, they just rehired Jeff Burr again.
This is going well.
Jeff has said countless times that he wanted to completely rewrite the script because there were just too many unanswered questions about the family in the movie.
Like, who's the new family? Why do they also have a desecrated grandfather? Who's the little girl who's apparently Leatherface's daughter? And why are there new brothers? He just really wanted to make a true sequel to the original, which definitely didn't happen in the second movie.
And what better way to do that than to rehire the original Leatherface, Icelandic American actor Gunnar Hansen? But very similar to the second movie, they just couldn't come to terms on the finances. Plus, Gunnar thought the script was shit too.
He talked to me about being in the film, and we looked at the script and talked about what a mess the script was.
I'm with you, Gunnar.
Eventually, they landed on former professional wrestler Randall Allen Miheloff to play Leatherface. Also, the movie we see today is missing so many huge parts than what the original had. Story has it they did a test screening in Burbank, California, and it got a pretty decent response. However, the people at New Line were livid because it was way too bloody and way too offensive, and they thought it would be impossible to sell the movie overseas.
Apparently, one of the deleted scenes had a naked man split in half while he was hanging upside down. Sounds like a good family movie to me.
So even before they submitted the movie to the ratings board, they took out a lot of the scenes. New Line still had to resubmit the movie over and over just to eventually get the R rating. The hope was that they could push it out for an October release, which sure as hell didn't happen, as the movie came out in January. Altogether, the movie was submitted to the MPAA 11 times. Here's director Jeff Burr's thoughts on how they cut the film down.
The theatrical version of the movie made me look incompetent as a director. Because there were scenes where I go, man, I directed this movie, I had no fucking idea what's going on. I mean, because you can't, it was literally incoherent the way they had to cut around this stuff.
Kind of felt the same way watching it, Jeff.
Story has it, Jeff eventually just wanted his name off the movie altogether.
The last words I said to Mike DeLuca, if you don't know, Mike DeLuca is now one of the most powerful guys in Hollywood. The last thing I said, I go, I want my name off the movie. What do you mean you want your name? I want my name off the fucking movie. I want my name off the fucking movie. And then he hangs up.
And I doubt neither Jeff or New Line felt any better when the movie eventually came out, bombing at the box office, opening at number 11 in its first weekend and only grossing about $5.7 million, making it the worst performing film in the series so far.
So you're probably already kind of feeling like this movie is a little bit of a disaster, but that also means there's a lot of potential for some corny jokes before we make our final verdict. But before we grab or stab this one, let's get into the movie.
The movie opens with about the only continuity we've seen thus far in the franchise, which is the title scroll prologue. This prologue lays out the events of the first movie, adding that final girl Sally from the original died in a private healthcare facility in 1977. It also adds that a single member of the Slaughter family lived to be put on trial, and this member of the family died in the gas chamber in 1981. It names this person as W.E. Sawyer. What's interesting here is now we find out after an investigation that W.E. Sawyer was the only member of the Sawyer family captured, as Leatherface, Drayton Sawyer, and Grandpa Sawyer had fled the scene. With the jury convinced that Leatherface was just a split personality of W.E. anytime he put on his mask, they were convinced he was the killer and thus sentenced to death in 1981. The title scroll ends, leaving the possibility open that Leatherface, though, may still be at large.
And because the movie is literally titled Leatherface, pretty safe to say the big fella's coming back for this one.
We then cut to a young girl named Gina getting sledgehammered in the face, marking our first kill of the movie. This leads to the title card, cued over by some really corny sound effects that I actually kind of liked. During the opening credits, we get to see how the Slaughter family does their arts and craft days, with some great close-ups of Leatherface cutting, slicing, sewing, and cleaning his new mask, while Gina's sister Sarah watches terrified from a nearby window. This opening scene is a homage to the original A Nightmare on Elm Street, where you see Freddy creating his iconic razor blade glove in the opening scene. I personally like this intro. Right off the bat, you get the vibe that the third installment of the franchise is going to be a lot different than the second, when the franchise took a massively different turn at making a comedy. Leatherface then hears the girl outside his window and is pissed his quiet art time is being interrupted. He slams open his door and he heads out on a hunt for Sarah. We never see what happens next. And following the opening credits, the franchise stays true to form and starts us off in a car in the middle of nowhere. And would you look at that? Another Mercedes-Benz like in the second movie. This time it's a really nice classic 1968 280 SEL. We are then introduced to our final girl, Michelle, played by Kate Hodge, and her boyfriend, maybe? Things clearly aren't going well between the two.
But hey, what's a better way to mend an already sinking relationship than a hot, sweaty, potentially fatal drive through the Texas desert?
Her boyfriend, Ryan, is played by William Butler, who also played Michael in Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Ryan's an arrogant pre-med student who kind of treats Michelle like shit throughout the movie. The two are actually on a cross-country road trip from California to Florida, so Michelle can deliver this car to her father. And once they get there, Michelle will be taken off on her own, most likely ending the relationship, as Ryan likes to point out. They turn up the radio and hear that a massive pit of bodies has been found nearby, which is causing the first ever traffic jam on the interstate. The two cross the state line for Texas, but like we know, it's actually just LA. You can see the California mountains throughout the movie, and they even had to completely change some shots because of the local wildfires that were happening in Southern California at the time. It's now nighttime, and we're at the massive grave that they heard about over the radio, and look who it is! Stretch, the final girl from the second TCM movie, who now looks like she's moved her way up from local radio to local TV.
Clearly her relationship with Leatherface didn't work out, either because he's a premature ejaculator or the fact that he was blown up with a grenade in the second movie.
The couple pulls up to the scene and we get a few camera snapshots with the typical TCM sound effect tipping their cap to the original movie. These two lucky dudes pulled the short end of the stick and get the pleasure of pulling body parts out of this muddy-ass grave.
Should've listened to my old man and went into real estate.
We then hear them say that there were probably 40 or 50 bodies here.
The old Sawyers have been busy while we've been away, haven't ya?
Ryan and Michelle answer some questions at the checkpoint and then continue on their way.
Seriously though, what are the cops expecting by asking every single car that drives through? What, Leatherface is gonna roll up and be like, hey man, that took me 10 hours to dig that hole, what the hell?
The next day, the conversation still revolves around the incident from the day before, and now we find out why Michelle likes Ryan, his sense of humor.
Looks like we're about here.
Where?
Middle of nowhere.
Joke's over as they hit an armadillo sitting in the road. The poor little fella has some sort of skull earring on it that we'll talk about the significance of a little bit later. Ryan tries to prove his manhood by brutally putting it out of his misery by crushing its head with a rock. We now find ourselves with a hitchhiker arriving at the Last Chance gas station, where we're introduced to Edward Tex Sawyer, played by Viggo Mortensen, who you probably know best as Aragorn from the Lord of the Rings franchise. We also meet Peeping Tom Alfredo Sawyer, played by Tom Everett, who enjoys cutting out his favorite Playboy articles in his free time and now owns a gas station after losing his job at the local slaughterhouse.
I'm sure for him, it's all about the articles, man.
And if the original Chainsaw movie didn't make you never want to stop at a Texas gas station again, this one might. Ryan and Michelle stop to get gas as any good victims would. Ryan goes to take a pee, and similar to the hitchhiker in the original movie, Alfredo takes a Polaroid of Michelle and tries to sell it to her. So anyone familiar with the franchise would probably immediately know this gas station is not a good place. After some incredibly creepy lines from Alfredo, Tex saves the day and steps in to help Michelle. Tex gives Michelle a little insight on Alfredo that he's the town loony, and then immediately starts flirting with Michelle in hopes that he can catch a ride. Ryan obviously hates the idea, either because he's jealous or just hates everyone but himself. While Michelle heads off to use the bathroom, Tex shows Ryan a new route that would get them to Houston faster. Michelle goes to use the bathroom, which is decorated with a bunch of naked women. Alfredo's now really excited because he gets to use his little peepholes. As he's spying on Michelle in the bathroom, he's interrupted by Tex.
My first time watching this movie, I was a little bit confused because it seemed like at first Tex and Alfredo knew each other, and then they were playing it off like they didn't know each other. But I'm sure it's just a ploy to like gain trust with the victims, that way they can lure them into the trap.
Tex and Alfredo get into it a bit, and Alfredo heads inside to grab a shotgun. In a panic, Ryan and Michelle speed off as Tex stays behind to try and solve the situation. Alfredo shoots out the back of their window and then appears to shoot Tex as well.
Holy fuck, he dusted him!
What happened? Dustin who?
The cowboy! He shot the cowboy!
What?
Amongst the chaos, Ryan tells Michelle to take the Cowboys' new route to Houston. It's now nighttime and we're back at Alfredo's gas station, and he's happy as a little clam while a truck pulls out of his garage. Ryan and Michelle then get a nice little surprise as a skin-covered truck pops its lights on right behind them.
Is this some kind of super truck or something? Is there nitrous in there? Is Vin Diesel in there driving? Because they not only caught up to them super fast, but this Mercedes-Benz coupe can't even outrun them.
The truck driver then throws a coyote onto their windshield, causing them to veer off the road. All while this is happening, they blow a tire as well. Oddly, the truck is now gone though. All of a sudden, the two are attacked by Leatherface as we get our first look at the big fella in the movie. Leatherface goes absolutely ham on Daddy's Benz, and the couple backs up, running over the big guy. Pissing him off so bad, he literally rips the trunk off with his bare hands. As the two drive off, a person that looks like Tex jumps in front of the car, causing them to swerve into another lane, almost hitting the Jeep driving past them. Both cars then fly off the road. The other car is driven by badass Benny, a veteran and all-around bad motherfucker in the movie. Benny is played by Ken Foree, who also had roles in the 1978 Dawn of the Dead and 2007's Halloween.
Fortunately though, for our final girl Michelle, Benny likes to go camping with assault rifles and military gear. That, along with his 6'5" frame, he's gonna be a lot to handle for the Sawyer family.
Benny gets out of his flip Jeep like nothing happened and heads over to make sure everyone's okay. Ryan tells Benny some crazy story about a man with a chainsaw that Benny just attributes to the crash. But when Michelle wakes up and tells the same story about some militant lumberjacks, he knows something fucked up's happening. As Benny heads back to his car for supplies, Benny finds a road full of flares and a new member of the Sawyer family. Tinker Sawyer, played by Joe Unger, who also played Sergeant Garcia in Wes Craven's 1984 A Nightmare on Elm Street. Fun fact, it's hard to see, but if you look closely throughout the movie, you can see that both the coyote thrown on top of the car and the armadillo from earlier have the same earring as Tinker. Tinker then tries to kill Benny with his truck, and Benny falls down a hill right into Leatherface's lap. And for the second time in the entire franchise, we see someone put up a good fight against the Big L as Benny and Leatherface go toe-to-toe. Right before Leatherface is able to cut Benny into little fillets, we see Sarah from the opening credits shout at Leatherface and draw his attention to her, saving Benny's life. Sarah loses Leatherface and then doubles back to Benny.
Who the hell are you?
Valid question.
Sarah then goes on to explain to Benny that they got her and her sisters a week ago. She also explains that she's the only one left in her group and that the family likes to lure people in from the road. She somehow escaped the nightmare and has now been surviving in the woods this entire time, surviving off of raw rats and thrown up flavored berries.
Nice.
Sarah then tosses Benny a very important lighter that will come in handy a little later. Benny and Sarah separate as Benny heads off to help Ryan and Michelle as they're now awake from the pain meds that apparently only last 15 minutes. Sadly, this is the last time we will ever see Sarah, as Leatherface quickly finds her and saws right through her torso with an underwhelming out-of-frame kill against a tree, marking the second kill of the movie. This kill was extremely cut down and was originally supposed to show Sarah cut in half. Benny now finds himself wandering around a swamp full of potentially killer booby traps while he looks for the others.
Nice neighborhood.
Man, I love the one-liners from the 80s and the 90s.
While Benny's cruising around the swamp area, Leatherface stumbles upon Ryan and Michelle. As they are trying to get away, Ryan shits into a bear trap type thing while Leatherface is close behind. Michelle and Ryan both know immediately that he's screwed.
Michelle either agrees that it's a lost cause, or it's just a perfect opportunity to pursue the good-looking cowboy Tex from the gas station.
Jokes aside, I'm sure Michelle knows there's nothing she can do at this point. So she's out of there like a boner in sweatpants, and we get back-to-back underwhelming chainsaw scenes as Ryan gets the saw off screen.
I'll tell you a secret though, Ryan's not dead. More on that in a minute.
I get it though, they didn't want that X rating, but it's still lame. Michelle then finds out that yeah, she got away from Leatherface, but now she gets to beat the whole damn family as she heads into the Sawyer house. She gets herself a breaking and entering charge and heads upstairs to see why she can hear a little girl crying. Oh hey, it is a little girl, which we've never seen in a TCM movie before. Aw, how sweet. The little girl and her doll from hell have matching dresses on. The little girl is played by Jennifer Banco, who just like William Butler was also in Friday the 13th Part 7, where she played the younger version of Tina, the girl that killed her dad with the telekinesis powers. The little girl then shanks Michelle, and the next thing she knows, here comes Tex into the room to grab her. We all saw that one coming.
Well, I guess Tex won't be Michelle's rebound man. Damn, they could have ruled Gondor together.
He then takes Michelle downstairs, but before we head down there with them, we pan around the super creepy little girl's room full of skeletons paying homage to the house in the original movie. At this point, Peep and Tom Alfredo Sawyer arrives with a fresh new bag of bodies, just in time to see Michelle's hands get nailed to a chair. And would you look at that? Despite being blown up in the second movie, Grandpa's back because the continuity of the franchise died the second they made part 2. Also, Grandpa seems a lot less alive in this one. The little Sawyer girl gives Grandpa a little bit of his favorite Ryan Mai Tai, and then we get introduced to Mama, played by Miriam Bird Nethery, who looks like Deb in those smoking commercials I grew up on. Mama, who has to speak through an electro-larynx, is kind of the Drayton Sawyer of this movie in a way. She doesn't do the killing, but definitely calls some of the shots. As the family's giving Michelle a warm Texas welcome, Tinker Sawyer's back with a little present for Mama, and its arrogant boyfriend Ryan, all messed up. Mama's really enjoying this. She's nibbling on what has to be something human, all while we get our first meat hook scene since the original. As Tex and Tinker hang up Ryan, although we don't actually get to see the meat hook in action this time as it all happens off screen unlike the original movie. Tex notices that Ryan's actually still alive, and I mean it's not as unbelievable as LG in the second movie, but damn, pretty impressive he can take the saw like that and still be alive. They then let Ryan hang a little while longer because we need to see what Alfredo's up to. Alfredo's casually wandering around the swamps talking to himself about the little prizes he was able to score recently. We can only imagine what sick and twisted stuff he did to this corpse.
Here we got a little pretty one. I don't like you anymore.
And we can only imagine how many bodies the family's hidden in the swamps here at this point, as Alfredo's tossing all kinds of body parts in there. Back inside the house, we get our best look at Leatherface's mask in this installment of the franchise. The Big L looking all nasty and gruesome like usual. However, I'll be honest, it's my least favorite mask and portrayal of the character up to this point. I mean, look at the blood and stuff on that mask. It looks like something you'd buy at a Spirit Halloween store. And nothing against R.A. Mihailoff, who played Leatherface. I think R.A. played the character well. He balanced the menacing part of the character along with the childlike side of him well, but with how much censorship happened with this movie, it made it pretty damn hard for the audience to be scared of Leatherface. I still don't think up to this point anyone's been able to top Gunnar Hansen's portrayal of the character in the first movie. Leatherface is jamming out to a little music and somewhat similar to the second film tries to bond with our final girl as he lets her listen to his headphones. Michelle wants nothing to do with it though, which pisses him off, but quickly forgets when Tex brings him a present that Tink made for him, which is one of the most badass weapons we've ever seen in a horror movie. A brand new golden chainsaw personally engraved with the family motto.
The saw is family.
And this thing is massive. Tink shows up moments later mad though because Leatherface hasn't killed Benny yet. And here we get another instance where we see the childlike side to Leatherface. Tink makes a big mistake by throwing Leatherface's Walkman into the oven. I guess he forgot how damn big he is, and the big fella's had enough with his bro. Leatherface makes Tink stick his good hand into the oven and grab his Walkman out. Then going over to Mama, pouting like a little kid whose brother stole his toy from him. Outside, Benny and Alfredo bump into each other, and Benny's now got him held up with his AR. After questioning Alfredo about what the hell's going on out here, Benny's had enough.
Fuck you, mister.
Benny, I hate to say it, but you really should have made sure he was dead. You'll see what I'm talking about a little bit later.
Leatherface, all upset about his Walkman, heads into his little craft den. Here he likes to admire his mask work and update his Etsy store with all your favorite earlobe necklaces. Back at the dinner table, they're trying to set up Michelle and Leatherface. Here we find out about some sick shit.
First of all, not only does the poor kid have to kiss Leatherface, but we also learn the identity of the little girl who turns out to be Leatherface's daughter. That, along with the fact that the little girl's mother was probably a victim, the entire thing's just pretty messed up.
Tex explains how he hates hitting people in the head, but luckily Tink created a new way to do it. This scene is massively cut down for censors, but you quickly get to see the little girl pull a string which sends a sledgehammer piling down into Ryan's face, marking the third kill of the movie. Leatherface decides to ruin the dinner mood by finally turning on his new toy, which changes the entire vibe of the dinner. Michelle starts screaming, which alerts Benny. Benny then opens fire on the house, shooting Mama in the chest, blowing off Tink's ear and a couple fingers, and Grandpa in the face. Mama got shot a whole bunch in the chest, and Tink didn't really seem to suffer any life-threatening wounds. I'm gonna now say we're on our fourth kill of the movie, only counting Mama as the next victim. Amidst the chaos, Michelle rips her own hands out of the nails and escapes the house.
Leatherface is stoked though, because he knows it's time for rock and roll and some more killing.
Michelle's done with this shit and finally snaps, and she's ready to take on Leatherface by herself.
I'm sick.
Fuck it!
As Leatherface and Michelle head off into the brush, Benny and Tex start fighting outside, and Benny says one of my favorite lines in the movie.
Why don't you leave us alone? You're hungry. Never heard of pizza?
I'm with you, Benny. The pizza? It's family in my house.
Fun fact, Benny actually broke Viggo Mortensen's ribs filming this scene. You can see Tex suddenly clutch after being thrown to the ground here. Amongst the fighting, Benny tosses Tex under the leaking gasoline. And remember that lighter from earlier we talked about? Yep, tosses that bad boy right onto Tex, and Benny gives us yet another classic line.
Toast, fuck.
Yep, Tex is definitely extra crispy now, marking the 5th kill of the movie. As Michelle's running away from Leatherface, she finds herself in one of the family's traps, but thanks to it getting caught on a tree, she has a chance to cut herself out, but not before being thrown into the swamp full of human corpses. Just before Leatherface gives her the saw, Benny football tackles his ass into the swamp, and we get a solid fight scene between the two biggest people in the movie.
I mean, it's great to have Benny and Leatherface squaring off again, which is cool as hell, but I'm just way too distracted by the chainsaw. It's still running in the water. Not only that, but it's not sinking at all. I mean, that's a big ass chromed out chainsaw. Apparently the thing was 80 pounds, but it's still floating?
Leatherface and Benny share a few punches before Leatherface gets the upper hand, pushing Benny into the still working chainsaw, but guess what?
He ain't dead.
As Michelle turns around to leave though, Leatherface jumps out of the water to grab her, but nah man, Michelle's had about enough. She grabs a big ass rock nearby and bashes Leatherface's head in, sending him back into the swamps where he belongs. Michelle's just that nice of a person though. She crushes his head in, all while apologizing at the same time. The nightmare seems to be over as we now see Michelle the next day attempting to walk to get help. She somehow doesn't hear a truck coming her way until it's next to her, and who is it? Benny? What the fuck?
Other than a little bit of blood on his head, this dude looks like he just got a solid 9 hours of sleep at a local Hampton Inn. Didn't Leatherface just push him into a chainsaw a few hours ago?
But yay, the happy ending continues as they get in the truck and leave the nightmare behind. Just kidding. Somehow Benny never notices that Alfredo's in the back of the truck with a sledgehammer. He bashes Benny before going after Michelle. Lucky for Michelle though, a loaded shotgun's in the car. After fighting for the gun, Michelle ends up with her sights right on Alfredo. Alfredo's finally realizing the truth that he hasn't been able to swallow since he was caught peeping on her in the bathroom.
I guess this kills our chance for a date on Saturday night, huh?
Shut up.
Yeah, pal. I'm gonna go with a no on that one.
But there's no way she hasn't cocked the gun, right? And we get our final scene of the movie as final girl Michelle blows Alfredo away and leaves his body for the birds.
There's roadkill all over Texas.
Got that right.
Marking the 6th and final kill of the movie. Benny and Michelle drive away, but wait, what other person can they bring back from the dead? Leatherface! The big fella enters the frame as they drive off, officially ending the movie.
Originally, both Benny and Leatherface's character were actually supposed to die because of their injuries, but New Line ultimately decided to shoot a new ending instead. This was partially because they did a test screening of the movie and people just really liked Benny's character. Director Jeff Burr, though, had no knowledge of the alternate ending and actually was completely surprised when he first saw the movie. Speaking of knowledge, let's drop some and find out the fate of the 3rd Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie and figure out if it's one we want to grab or one we want to stab. First off are the kills. There were 6 total deaths in TCM3, and I'm not going to count Tinker's because his injuries didn't really seem fatal, we just didn't really see him again. The kills were just way too cut down, and honestly, I can't really think of a single good one that I actually really liked. Also, an hour into the movie, Leatherface gets his badass chromed out chainsaw and doesn't even kill anyone with it. I'm just gonna move on from this section because we all know this was way too cut down and messy, and it was just a disaster. So I'm just gonna move on before I get too riled up. Second are the characters. Final girl Michelle was okay, I guess. The first half of the movie, her character kind of just made you want to fall asleep. The second half of the movie, her character was a little bit better. I mean, it was kind of satisfying seeing arrogant Ryan get killed. That was nice. Viggo Mortensen did a good job in his role. I like Benny's character, probably part of the reason why they kept him alive. The little girl was definitely creepy, but I could have definitely done without that side plot of the story. Overall, I mean, I guess the characters were okay. Third, the impact the movie had on either the genre or the franchise at the time, which was probably, I guess you could say, a bad impact. I mean, New Line ditched the franchise after this movie, so that's probably saying something. And lastly, how scary was the movie? And yeah, I mean, the movie was scarier than the second Chainsaw movie, but that really isn't saying much because the second Chainsaw movie wasn't even supposed to be scary. But, I mean, overall, it wasn't really scary. There were some parts that were kind of a little bit disgusting, like Leatherface kissing the little girl in the mouth and that whole subplot. I mean, there was a little bit of gore and some stuff off screen, but I really didn't think it was a scary movie. I mean, maybe in 1990, being that it's not a supernatural film, that affects some people and makes them a little bit more scared. Like, these are events that you could believe could actually happen to you, especially, you know, if you're caught in the middle of nowhere somewhere. But overall, was it a scary movie? I don't think so. And with all that said, I'm gonna have to go with a stab on this one. I mean, the movie just wasn't that good. I like the fact that they tried to go back to the gritty roots of the original movie, but just because you tried, it doesn't really mean anything. The movie just wasn't that good. I mean, it wasn't even filmed in Texas. Every kill was a letdown. The production was just a mess and all over the place. And it just wasn't that good of a movie. I guess the redeeming factor that it does have is the one-liners were pretty great. I can't lie, those are pretty good and I'll remember those for sure, but it just wasn't that good. And again, you guys, just because I don't like a movie doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and watch the movie for yourself. Not only are you supporting the horror genre, which gives us more horror movies, but a movie I might not like, you might really love. So always keep that in mind. And don't go posting death threats to my dog in the comments section either. The movie just, I don't know, it just really didn't do it for me. And there you go, that wraps up the dilapidated mess we call Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Next week, we jump 5 years into the future and take a look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation and see how Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger fit into the franchise. In the meantime though, I'm Matt McFarland and you just finished watching Grab or Stab. Thank you so much for watching another Grab or Stab episode, guys. I really do appreciate it. It always sucks when the business side of the movie industry affects how a movie's made. Like this movie, for example, if they could have pushed through with some of the kills, some of the gore, I think it could have done okay. But the fact that the plot wasn't very good, the kills were a letdown, the characters weren't very good, there wasn't really much you can do. I mean, when the plot of a movie kind of sucks, but the kills are really good, then it at least carves a little niche for itself in the genre, but this movie just wasn't able to do that. But anyways, you guys, if you like horror content like this or just horror content in general, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button as well. It really helps to get the channel off to a good start. Be on the lookout for Grab or Stab episodes coming out every single Friday. And anyways, you guys, thanks again for watching. I really do appreciate it, and take care.